The turkey was still in my hands when my sister walked through the door without knocking. I'd driven 40 minutes to get to my parents' house, left work early, told my supervisor I had a family thing. And I did, technically. Christmas dinner, the kind we do every year where my mom spends 3 days cleaning the house and my dad sets the table with the good plates, the ones we're not supposed to use but always end up using anyway. I set the dish down on the counter. My mom was already pulling my sister into a hug like she hadn't seen her in years. It had been 3 weeks. "She looks thin," my aunt whispered to me. I didn't say anything. My sister, I'll call her Tess, had that look she always gets when she walks into a room, chin up, eyes scanning like she's deciding whether the place meets her standards. She was wearing a new coat, camel-colored, long, the kind you see in department store windows with a price tag that makes you do a double take. I recognized the buttons, a brand I'd looked up once when I was having a weak moment. The kind of moment where you convince yourself you deserve something nice. I put it back. She smiled at me across the kitchen. "You cut your hair." "A few months ago," I said. "Cute." She turned back to our mom. That was the hello. I should explain something first, because if I don't, the rest of this won't make sense. 14 months before that Christmas dinner, my sister lost her job. She'd been working at a marketing agency downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick and kombucha on tap, and she got laid off in a round of cuts that took out half her department. It happened to a lot of people that year. I felt bad for her. Genuinely. She called me crying, and I stayed on the phone for 2 hours. What happened next is the part I kept quiet about. Her lease was up at the end of that month. She'd been living in a one-bedroom in the city, paying rent that always seemed a little too high for someone saving nothing. But she made good money, and it was her business. When the job disappeared, the math stopped working overnight. She had about 6 weeks of savings, maybe less. She didn't want to move home. I understood that. I didn't want to move home either, and I was 28, same as her. And she said she had interviews lined up. Said it like she was certain. My dad offered to help. But he's been on a fixed income since his back surgery, and my mom picks up shifts at the pharmacy. But it's not like they have a cushion. I'm the one with the stable job. I work in hospital billing, not glamorous, but steady. Benefits. A salary that lets me sleep at night mostly, so I said I'd cover 2 months, just to get her through. Just until something came through. 2 months turned into 14. I paid her rent directly to the landlord. She never saw the money, it never touched her account. I just called the rental office and set up a recurring payment. I told myself it was temporary. Every month I told myself that. Here's the thing, I didn't tell anyone, she didn't know it was me. When the agency reached out about the arrears notice she'd gotten the month before I stepped in, she told me she'd sorted it out, that she'd gotten some help from a friend. I never corrected her. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I didn't want to make it weird. Maybe I didn't want her to feel like she owed me. Maybe I just didn't want to have that conversation. By month 4, she'd stopped mentioning the job search as much. By month 8, she had started posting on Instagram again. Branches. A weekend trip to Savannah. The coat. She'd tagged a restaurant I'd been wanting to try for a year. The one with the 3-month wait list. I was picking up Saturday shifts at a medical records office downtown to cover what I was paying for her. Dinner that Christmas was the usual production. My mom made green bean casserole and sweet potato pie. My dad carved the turkey badly and insisted on doing it himself. My aunt brought a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion, which apparently was this. My brother sat at the corner of the table and kept his headphones around his neck like he might need to escape at any moment. Tess sat across from me. She'd helped set the table, I'll give her that. Folded the napkins into little triangles. Asked my mom if the rolls were from scratch. We were halfway through dinner when she did it. "Okay," she said, putting her fork down. "I saw this thing online and I think we should do it." My mom looked up. Instead of going around saying what we're thankful for, she paused for effect, the way she always does. We go around and say what we're not thankful for. Like what we'd be fine without this year. Keep it light, keep it funny. My dad laughed a little. My aunt said, "Oh, that's different." My brother looked up from his plate for the first time since we sat down. I'll start, Tess said, because of course she would. I'm not thankful for my old job, honestly. Good riddance. Best thing that ever happened to me was getting out of that place. Everyone nodded. Fair enough. My aunt went next. Said something about her neighbor's leaf blower. My dad said property taxes. My brother said alarm clocks. It was going fine. It was just the thing it was supposed to be. Light, funny, a little nothing game to get through dessert. Then it got to Tess again. She'd apparently decided she had a second one. She smiled. That smile. The one that means she thinks she's being charming. And said, I'm also not thankful for the people in my life who think working yourself into the ground is a personality. Like, congratulations on your overtime, but some of us actually know how to live. She laughed after she said it. My aunt laughed too, the polite kind. My mom looked at her plate. My dad said, okay, but I felt it. The way you feel something land before your brain has processed it, the heat in my face. The specific, clarifying humiliation of being talked about in the third person while sitting 4 feet away. She was talking about me. I was the only one at that table working 2 jobs. I was the only one who'd mentioned overtime in the last year. Everyone knew it, including her. She took a bite of her sweet potato pie like she'd just said something clever. I picked up my glass. I took a sip of water. I said Mel, like I'd just heard something mildly interesting on the radio. And I smiled. My mom found me in the kitchen after dinner, while I was wrapping up the leftover rolls. She didn't mean it, she said. I know, I said. She's been having a hard time. I know that too, I said. My mom put her hand on my arm for a second and then went back out to the living room. I finished wrapping the rolls. I washed the dish the green bean casserole came in. I dried it. I put it back in the cabinet where it always goes. I didn't cry. I was a little surprised by that. What I felt instead was something I don't have a perfect word for. Not anger exactly. More like clarity. The kind you get when something you'd been quietly doubting finally resolves itself into a clear picture. I'd spent 14 months telling myself she was figuring it out, that she was embarrassed and doing her best and just needed more time, that she didn't know what I was doing for her, and that was fine. That was how I wanted it. But she was wearing a new coat. She'd gone to Savannah. She'd posted 47 stories in the last 3 weeks, and every single one was a restaurant or a boutique or a sunset from somewhere she'd driven 2 hours to see. And she was sitting at my parents' Christmas table, eating food my mom made, telling everyone that people who work hard are missing the point. I finished in the kitchen. I hugged my mom. I told my dad to rest his back. I said bye to my aunt. I ruffled my brother's hair because he still lets me do that. I hugged Tess last. Short, normal, the regular kind. Drive safe, she said. You too, I said. I sat in my car in the driveway for about 4 minutes. The heat was on. The radio wasn't. Then I picked up my phone and opened the rental portal. I want to be clear about what the rental portal was. It wasn't some dramatic moment. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was just sitting there in the dark in my car with the heat running, and I thought, I'm going to stop. Not because I was angry exactly. More because I finally understood that I'd been treating this like a temporary situation for 14 months, and at some point temporary stops meaning what you think it means. The portal had my payment information saved. I'd been logging in every month. Quiet. No fanfare. The way you pay a utility bill. This time I logged in and I canceled the recurring payment. Effective end of the current billing cycle. I got a confirmation email 30 seconds later. I closed the app. I drove home. Made tea. Went to bed. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't text her. I didn't leave a note. Didn't send an explanation. Didn't call the landlord to warn them. I just stopped. The thing about rent is that it's not like other bills. When you don't pay your electricity, the lights go out. When you don't pay your phone, the calls stop. But rent takes a minute. There's a grace period, a notice, a process. 8 days after Christmas, I got a call from my mom. Tess is really upset, she said. About what? She got a notice. From her building. I waited. She says her rent wasn't paid. She doesn't understand what happened. I said, that's stressful. She asked if you could help. And there it was. The shape of the whole thing, finally visible. 14 months of me paying quietly, and the moment it stopped, I was the first person she thought of. Not because she'd figured it out. Because on some level, she already knew. I can't help with that right now, I said. I have a lot going on. My mom was quiet for a second. Should I tell her to call you? If she wants to, I said. But my answer will be the same. Tess called 3 times that day. I let them go to voicemail. The first one was confused. Her voice had that careful quality she uses when she's trying to seem calm. She said there must have been some kind of mix-up. She was looking into it. She just wanted to give me a heads up in case. And then she trailed off, which told me everything about how much she actually knew. The second voicemail dropped the careful part. She said she was panicking. Said the notice gave her 10 days. Said she'd tried to reach out to the building management and they were telling her the account was closed. She kept saying, I don't understand what happened, but her voice had a different quality by the end, like someone who had started to understand and was hoping they were wrong. The third one, she stopped pretending. She said she knew it had been me. She didn't say how she knew. I think the building told her when she went in to ask questions that a third-party account had been canceled. She said she was sorry she hadn't thanked me properly. She said she'd been overwhelmed and it was a hard year. She said she didn't think I'd actually stop. That last line stayed with me for a while. She didn't think I'd actually stop. I called her back that evening. I want to be honest about how that conversation went because I've seen enough of these stories to know that the satisfying version would be me delivering some perfect speech and her crumbling and everything resolving cleanly. That's not what happened. I told her I was sorry she was in a hard spot. I meant it. I told her I couldn't keep covering her rent. I meant that too. I told her I should have had this conversation a long time ago, instead of just paying quietly and hoping things would sort themselves out. And I took responsibility for that part. That was true also. She cried. I let her. She said she didn't know how she was going to manage. I told her there were options. Subletting, talking to her building about a payment plan, reaching back out to some of the contacts she had from her old job. I asked if she looked at any temp work recently. She said she hadn't. I said, okay, I think that's a good place to start. She asked if I was angry about the Christmas thing. I thought about it. I'm not angry, I said. I'm just done. There was a long pause. I didn't know it was you the whole time, she said. I know, I said. I feel terrible. I believe you, I said. And I did. I just also believe that feeling terrible and changing weren't the same thing, and that I'd spent over a year treating them like they were. My aunt called 2 days later. She'd heard something. I'm not sure what version. She asked me if everything was okay with Tess. She's going to be fine, I said. She's figuring some things out. You know your mother worries. I know she does. She thinks you and Tess had a falling out. We had a conversation, I said. A long overdue one. My aunt made a sound that could have meant anything. Then she said, you know, your mother used to say you were the responsible one. I think she meant it as a compliment. I think she did too, I said. After we hung up, I sat with that for a while. The responsible one. The one who shows up, who covers things, who doesn't nick a scene at dinner. I'd worn that label my whole life like it was something I'd earned. And somewhere along the way, it had started meaning something different. Not the person who handles her own business, but the person who handles everyone else's. I didn't want to be that anymore. January was quiet. Tess handled the notice. I don't know all the details, but she worked something out with the building. I think a short-term repayment plan while she found a subletter for the second bedroom she'd never been using. She picked up some freelance work through someone she knew. She texted me in mid-January. Just a few lines, said she'd gotten 2 projects and was feeling more like herself. I texted back, that's really good to hear. I meant it. I wasn't sitting around hoping things went badly for her. That was never the point. The point was that I had been participating in something, quietly, willingly, for a long time. That wasn't helping either of us. I was letting her believe she was managing when she wasn't. And she was letting herself believe she didn't need to try harder because nothing actually broke. Now something had broken, and she was dealing with it. The way adults deal with things. In February, a position opened up at a clinic I'd applied to about 2 years ago and forgotten about. It was a billing coordinator role. Better hours than my current job, better pay, 10 minutes from my apartment instead of 45. I applied on a Tuesday, interviewed on a Thursday, got the offer the following Monday. I gave my notice at the end of that week. On my last day at the old job, I drove home a different way, just to see something different out the window. I picked up groceries. I made dinner at home for the first time in what felt like months. Actually cooked, not just heated something up. I sat at my own kitchen table and ate it without looking at my phone. I thought about the Christmas dinner, the coat, the way she'd said, "Some of us actually know how to live." I didn't feel bitter about it. I felt something quieter than that. Something that, if I had to name it, I'd call relief. The relief of finally acting like someone who knows her own worth. Not in a declaration, not in a speech, just in a quiet decision made alone in a car in a dark driveway. I signed the paperwork for the new job on a Wednesday morning. When the pen left the page, I felt something in my chest settle, like I'd finally put something down I'd been carrying for a very long time, and I hadn't even realized how heavy it was until my hands were empty. I've thought about that Christmas dinner a lot since then. Not obsessively, more the way you think about a scar after it's healed. You press on it sometimes, not because it hurts, but because you're checking to see if it still does. It doesn't, mostly. What I keep coming back to isn't the thing Tess said at the table. It's what I did after. Or more accurately, what I didn't do. I didn't yell. I didn't throw it in her face that I was the one logging into that rental portal every single month. I didn't make a scene in front of my parents or my aunt or my brother sitting there with his headphones around his neck. I just smiled, drove home, and made a decision. That decision cost me nothing dramatic. It cost me about 40 seconds and a stable internet connection, and it changed everything. I used to think that taking care of people was its own reward, that being the responsible one meant something. And I think part of me believed, without ever saying it out loud, that if I kept showing up quietly, eventually the people I was showing up for would notice, would reciprocate, would at least, at minimum, not mock me at the dinner table for it. That's not how it works. I know that now. What I understand now is that there's a difference between generosity and invisibility. I had confused the two for a long time. I thought staying quiet about what I was doing for Tess was generosity, not making her feel bad, not holding it over her head. But it wasn't just that. It was also me making myself invisible, making my effort invisible, training everyone around me, including myself, to treat my labor as something that simply existed, like weather, like a utility that ran in the background. You don't thank the electrical grid, you just flip the switch. When I canceled that payment, I wasn't punishing her. I know that's what it looked like from the outside, and I understand why. But from the inside, it felt like something different. It felt like I was finally being honest. With her, with my family, and most of all with myself, about what I could and couldn't keep doing, about what I was willing to carry and what I wasn't. There's a version of this story where I'm the villain, where I pulled the rug out from under my struggling sister right before the new year and left her scrambling. I've heard that version. My mom implied it gently, and I sat with it because I think it's important to sit with the uncomfortable interpretations of your own choices before you decide how you feel about them. But here's what I kept coming back to. I had been helping Tess for 14 months, silently, consistently, at real cost to myself. And in that time, she had not looked for a full-time job, had not cut back her spending, had not asked once how I was doing, or whether I was stretched thin. She had gone to Savannah. She had bought the coat, and then she sat across from me at Christmas and used her time at the table to describe people like me as people who didn't know how to live. The consequences that followed were not something I engineered out of cruelty. They were just what happens when support disappears and nothing has been built to replace it. That's not punishment. That's reality, finally allowed to be real. What I want to remember, what I think matters, is that I didn't become cold. I didn't swear off helping people. I called her back. I talked to her honestly, maybe for the first time. I told her there were options, and I meant it. What I stopped doing was carrying someone else's life while she watched me strain under the weight and called me a warning label. The new job starts Monday. The commute is 12 minutes. I made dinner at home again last night and sat at my own table and thought about nothing in particular. That's what it feels like when you put something down that was never yours to carry in the first place.